One of the biggest bombshell news that Elon Musk shared at the last earnings call was that Tesla is already in talks with one major automaker for licensing Tesla's full self-driving system. This development comes immediately after the rapid-fire Tesla supercharger network partnerships with Ford, GM, Aptera, Rivian, Volvo, Polestar, and soon Mercedes-Benz and Nissan, who are now all adopting the North American charging standard and getting access to Tesla's charging stations in the US. Today's guest believes that these partnerships set Tesla up to license their entire operating system and not just simply charging. How would these partnerships work? How might the revenue split happen? And of course, how will these partnerships reshape the entire competitive landscape, setting Tesla up to be the dominant player with massive market share and stock upside potential? Larry Goldberg is a serial entrepreneur, angel investor, and co-author of the book, The Decision Model. He co-founded a company called Sapiens Decision that helps business analysts automate processes and decisions. Now retired, he's traveling the world and studying Tesla. Welcome, Larry. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Herbert. I really appreciate being here.
Love it. You were well received last time, so I appreciate this. And you've come with a really big idea. So I heard you talking about Tesla's operating system and becoming a vendor to other large auto OEMs. So
Right.
What is this Tesla operating system, and why would Tesla want to do this?
Well, I'd like to set the stage in answering that because it trips off the tongue quite easily, but it's really a lot of concepts to bake in before you can really appreciate what the opportunity is and why the opportunity is so important to Tesla and to the other OEMs. So I put together a few slides. I'd like to talk you through those, and then I think that sets the stage, and then I'll explain what I think Tesla should do with this. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Yeah, let's go.
So I'm talking about being beyond an auto OEM I don't talk about a tier 1 supplier to the OEMs. I talk about a tier 0.5 supplier. And I'm going to explain what a tier 0.5 supplier is. And I want to start by looking at a tweet that really got me many years ago, actually 5 years ago. I was a relatively early investor in Tesla, but when we were struggling with the launch of the 3 and going through production hell, Elon announced one day with some satisfaction that they had produced 7,000 cars in 7 days. And this fellow from Ford, fairly senior guy in Ford, Steve Armstrong, tweaked him by saying 7,000 cars in about 4 hours, what we do at Ford.
Yeah.
Exactly. And pride comes before a fall, as we all know. So I put together an outtake of Monroe Live, looking at Ford's first EV, and I'd like to, have us look at that because I think this tells the tale that I'm going to kind of embellish on. You want to play that?
Okay, so I'm about to play a 4-minute video that was produced by Sandy Monroe and Monroe Live. Let's watch this now.
Hey everybody, welcome again to Monroe Live. And today we're going to start off basically looking at the front end of the vehicle. I want to have a look at the frunk and compare it to the existing one that we have here from Tesla. I want to look at how the cooling system works, and I think it'll be kind of an interesting program. The guys have told me that there's lots of stuff for me to look at. I was very shocked at how many hoses and how many other doodads are floating around inside this thing. So let's go over here and just have a quick look. The other thing we tried to get rid of was, if you'll notice here, box on top of box, on top of box, on top of box, on top of box, and then we've got a cross car beam, and then another box. And then look at all these screws. We can't count them all up. We'll do that later on. But the deal here is that there's a myriad of things that we just were shocked at. These are the componentry that are inside the frunk. So we're looking at a lot of bits and pieces, and the first question is, well, how does that compare with Tesla? Well, this is Tesla's. They have a cowl piece that goes over in the front, and the rest of it just seals off into the basically the body. So this is kind of a little more elegant design because it's got a lot less parts. So let's have a look at what we see in here with all of this, and look at what Tesla had. So in essence, this is the octo valve. This is what we call the super manifold, and these are two heat exchangers. These all are in one relatively small package with only a few hoses that go from place to place. That means a lot less leak paths. These leak paths are something that are the bane of construction, especially if you're looking at trying to push a car out every 60 seconds or so. That's what these guys are hopefully going to be doing, because we want to make sure that, or they want to make sure that the customers are happy and there's no leaks all over their floors. I think that this could be packaged inside this vehicle, something similar to this. It might look a little bit different, but certainly it won't look as complicated as that, and it'll never have as many quality problems as far as leak paths and whatnot are concerned. So I really would like to say to Ford, if you could, it might be a good idea to really rethink this. This will cut the cost, it'll cut the weight, because all those hoses are filled with fluid. And fluid is a lot heavier than a couple of pieces of plastic and a die casting. So at the end of the day, I'm not as pleased as what I was hoping to be when we pulled the frunk out, but I can tell you for sure that this is better than the ID4. And although we didn't take too much time to pull out the frunk and whatnot from the Polestar 2, I'm pretty sure that Ford will easily compete with that one as well. It's just that these are things that should be addressed, and soon. Now, I will tell you that Tesla changed from what they had with the super bottle to this process, and they did it in less than a year. That's a challenge that Ford Motor Company should be taking on right now, and hopefully, hopefully they'll be able to make it as a running change in both the Mustang here and the Lightning.
So you get a sense, sense of the challenge that Ford has, and you know, that pride that that guy had in, you know, Ford producing X thousand in X hours really comes before the fall, because what they, you know, they've had to re-engineer all those hoses, and they have done that, but still they have this enormous problem of the design of that car. And if you look at the next slide, you'll see that, you know, here we have Jim Farley, who, you know, is probably one of the most advanced thinkers of all the OEM heads of companies, CEOs. But he talked about the biggest eye-opening moment in his personal career when he realized we had completely changed our approach to platforms. He talks about the inverter technology, the efficiency of the system, the vehicle, the massive complexity reduction, and the cost competitive reduction that he has to make in the second cycle being just as dramatic. And then he talks about, you know, the gearbox, the motors, and how we thought about investment in braking systems, wiring systems, the diversity of battery chemistry like LFP. It was all a moment where we just looked at each other and said, we have to go left to beat and compete with these competitors to make to make a really good EV. So you get a sense that he understands the scope of the challenge. But I have to say, when you look at their overrun, their cost overrun this year, you know, they're talking about cost overruns of $2.5 billion in trying to build this this EV factory and this EV business. And you see him scaling back on the EV business. You understand that they haven't begun to really address the scope of this problem. And the scope of this problem gets even worse when you look at the financial implications. Let's look at that next slide, because what I've done is I've taken, some, not all, but some OEMs and compared their return on assets. And the difference, it is staggering.
Wow.
The only company that's even close to Tesla's class, even close, is like, 17% below Tesla, but it's close, is Ferrari, who will sell you a handmade car if you line up and wait for 2 years, for your car and pay $400,000. And they make 13% return on the assets compared to Tesla's 15 plus. And by the way, that wasn't their best quarter either. That included, the first and the second quarter of this year.
Yeah.
Look at Mercedes. And then you start going down the line, and where does Ford sit?
Yeah.
Right at the bottom, earning 10% of what Tesla is earning on their assets. Where are they going to get the money? Look at GM. GM is almost respectable at literally a fifth of the profitability of Tesla. The scope of this is just staggering. And here's the interesting part. Tesla's done the hard work. The very thing that Jim Farley was brooding about, Tesla's aced, and they're actually delivering third generation, and they're working on their fourth generation, which is going to be even more profitable.
Mm-hmm.
So think about it. Think about the cost that these guys face. Think about the absolute, turnaround that they have to do. And where's the money going to come from? Where's the R&D going to come from? Where are the people going to come from? Where are the engineers? Where are the software engineers going to come from? Because not only do they face a revolution in designing their cars, but they also face a digital revolution. And I'm going to talk about that in a bit, which none of them are ready for. So now let's look at the next slide, because this slide, the next slide talks about the tiers in the automotive supply chain. So what do we mean about tiers in automotive supply chain? If you look at the top of that box, there's this small little dot of, the 140 or so OEMs across the world, or across the US, I should say. Those OEMs, they are supplied for their assemblies and their parts by what we call tier 1 OEMs. And that's the little orange square below the OEMs. Those are the tier 1s. There are 5,241 of them. Now, where are those tier 1? Those are the guys that make, the assemblies for, the drivetrain, the assemblies for the brakes, the assemblies for the electrical part of the electrical system, their components of the electrical system. But they depend upon who? Tier 2 sites.
Yes.
For their supplies. And tier 2 sites depend upon who? Tier 3 sites. Now we're in Jeff Lutz's territory, right? This is the whole supply chain. And look what it consists of. 285,000 vendors.
Yeah.
To make those cars. So can you imagine the complexity of redesigning your vehicle from scratch, using completely different components to what these 285,776 less Tesla and its direct suppliers? Can you imagine the changes? Can you imagine the scope? And this is what Jim Farley means when he said, we have to turn left. He has to reverse. Never mind turn left. But you get an idea of the scope of this problem. But here's a very interesting slide. This next slide comes from a consultant, Oliver Wyman, consulting engineers and consulting firm that talked about new automotive business models. So this is a complex slide, but what he's done is he's tried to break it down into the kinds of suppliers that we have now and we're going to need. And he talks about, if you look at the number one, that little box in number one, you see he talks about ramp down suppliers of fading technologies. So you got to keep, the assembly line running on the, existing trucks and the Jeeps and the whatevers that you're busy producing, that you hope and pray customers are going to continue buying. Now, you and I spoke, I think, some months ago about this is going to fall off a cliff in due course. And it's falling off a cliff right now in China, but it's going to fall off a cliff here. And those fading technologies, those suppliers are going to fall with them. And there's a serious problem in that regard. Then we talk about a supply chain for, quote, digital technology specialist. And we talk about a supply chain, number 3, for a digital module system integrator. And within that, there's the e-drive and battery specialist. And then there's the autonomous connected HMI specialist. Now, honestly, that's old think. That's exactly how I would think a consultant to the legacy automotive business would think about it. But these things that they're talking about, these digital technologies, the digital modules, the e-drive and battery specialists, the autonomous connected HMI specialists, these are not separate disciplines.
Right.
These are actually integrated disciplines, because if you go to Tesla, they don't have things like this. They don't have boxes around these people. They have a Tesla operating system. The drivetrain is integrated with electronics. The electronics are integrated with the autonomous and connected operations. There's one design. There are not 5 different designs with 5 different vendors or 6 different vendors or 10 different vendors and then have to be integrated, or 1,000 different vendors, actually. So this is how Farley may be thinking. And I don't presume to think that he's thinking that, but this is the old speak. Now, in that box number 4, we have tier 0.5. And I love that idea. I think it's a really good idea, because it's no longer excuse my dog. There's no longer a tier 1 or a tier 2 or a tier 3 in this world. It's a tier 5. It is a single integrated specialist who's building the electronics. What I'm trying to say here is that the structure of the OEM of the suppliers to the OEMs are going to have to evolve. The notion that the suppliers design these sub-assemblies and then the OEM has to conform to that design. The idea of tier 0.5 is that it works integrally with the OEM to design the OEM's requirement. But the notion that that can be spread across 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 20 or 1,000 or 238,000 vendors through the channel is not going to work either. Now, Tesla have multiple suppliers. They do buy components, and I'm going to illustrate that in a few minutes. But the design and the integration specialty is all done within Tesla. And that's the key difference, because there is an operating system that controls the vehicle. There is a computer system that is integrated with the autonomy system, with FSD. There is, a single network not multiple different networks with multiple different, computers. There's one computer that controls the whole car. And this is key to, the cost and the profitability. Tesla aren't making, 3 times, 5 times, and 10 times the profit on a dollar invested compared to other cars by accident. They're not doing it because they're buying cheap components. They're doing it because they designed a single system that eliminates everything that's redundant. The best part, no part. And so if Ford is going to win, if GM is going to win, if you name it, OEM is going to win, they're going to have to do the same thing. And why reinvent the wheel? Why not work with a tier 0.5 vendor like Tesla to provide the same capability that Tesla has? And why shouldn't Tesla do that? Because after all, it'll just mean more FSD cars on the road. After all, it'll mean more Tesla-driven cars on the road. There's margin in it for Tesla, and there's plenty margin for the OEM. If Tesla's making 15% on invested capital, they can give up 13 of those percent, take 2%, and the OEM's still making 4 times what they were making.
Gotcha. Okay, so let me just summarize what I think I've heard you say here, which is fantastic. So currently, the OEMs, these legacy auto manufacturers, really what they are fancy assemblers. They have these 250,000 parts makers, and then they all come up and then they deliver to them and then they connect them together. So they're not, they didn't design them. They just take what the source, who can make a certain part. And as you saw in that video by Sandy Monroe, it's like this box attached to this box on top of this box because they take those pieces and connect together. They didn't design like the octo valve that Tesla did that could replace all of that. So then, and then when you add in this new world of software, digital integrator, Tesla's already done this. And then you then overlaid on top of that the actual margins that Tesla's able to do. And these guys are not making any margins because of this. And so in order for them to do this, instead of trying to work with their 200,000, I think Jim Farley has said there's 150 suppliers for the software part of it alone. Why do that? Why not partner with Tesla? And then you don't need to, basically you have to drop all your existing OEMs. Is this what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. It goes further though. Yeah. It goes a lot further because we're talking about the next level of software. We're talking about inventing software that doesn't exist right now to drive the car autonomously. And you have to integrate that into the design of the vehicle. You can't add that to the vehicle. And now there are so many issues that arise from that it changes the game. So there's a lot to be said. If we go to that next slide, I just want to show you the danger, that the looming danger. We've talked about how much better it would be if the OEM just worked with Tesla for a single operating system with a single concept and so on. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But look at the OEMs right now. We've talked about the current design of vehicles, internal combustion vehicles falling off a cliff. Right. This slide is a slide prepared by Deloitte that talks about the financial condition of many of these tier one suppliers. And everything you see in the red are suppliers whose margins just don't qualify them to go through tough times. In fact, if you look at this breakdown of the suppliers, you'll see that there's really only in the top right-hand corner, 7% of all the suppliers that have the financial wherewithal to go through a storm. I don't want to get into the slide in very great detail, but
I get it.
it's enough to know that you are not dealing with the most healthy ecosystem in the world. And these guys have been through a very tough time in the last 2 years. So you can imagine that they're not much better now. So, I mean, when you think about Farley losing $4 billion building out this, and he's not alone. General Motors, it's no accident that General Motors aren't meeting their commitments or their promises of, umpteen dozen, EV vehicles being delivered in 2023, now moving out to 2025. Honda talking about, globally talking about 30 new vehicles. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. And we know it's not. We knew it wasn't going to happen. Those of us who are invested heavily in Tesla had the inkling. But here is the reason for it. This is a 100-year-old system, and the problem is not in the design of this internal combustion engine based vehicle. That's not the problem. The problem is much deeper. The problem is this entire ecosystem is not fit for
Change.
Change. So, we have an ecosystem that we've developed. It's called Tesla. They're now making cars, delivering cars at a price that nobody can compete with. And they're making 3 times, 5 times, and 7 times the profitability. So the natural move is, for the guy who really wants to compete, is to pay them a small premium, a license fee, and just take it all over. And it pays them. It pays Tesla, because it speeds this transition to, this EV world. It adds the number of vehicles on the road. It adds the number of FSD cars on the road. And it is a channel for Tesla to earn some reasonable amount of money while the other car guys do very well.
Okay. I've got 2 questions for you, Larry.
Yeah.
So I need to understand this. So number 1, FSD, so full self-driving.
Mhm.
There's many people that are saying that actually FSD is something that you could easily retrofit any car, even a nice car, because it just needs the 8 cameras and a computer system and the hardware. But that is one. So that kind of conflicts a little bit of what you just said a little bit earlier. And then the second question is, can you explain the operating system? What does that? Because currently today they've partnered for the supercharger network that includes integration to the app, it includes the ability to obviously track, integrate into all the things that a car is doing, the brains of the car. But what do you mean by operating system? Because I need to tie back what you just said with the 250,000 suppliers. So what
Mhm.
parts of that would it actually replace?
So every subcomponent in an ICE vehicle has a computer, a form
Right.
of a
True.
computer, a chip.
True.
There may be, I don't know. I don't know the number. I have to pluck a number out of the air, but a multitude of different computers in a standard, or different computer chips in a standard ICE vehicle. Each one supplied by a different vendor, each one programmed by a different vendor. That's what Farley meant when he said he's got 150 different
Yes.
programs running on his computer. That's not so in Tesla. Tesla has a single operating system, vehicle operating system. It's not, the vehicle operating system is of course tied into their app. That's what gives the app such power and such visibility into the rest of the vehicle. But, in a very short period of time, Tesla's going to roll out their 48-volt system. And that's going to reduce the wiring harness in the car by a dramatic amount. And the bulk of the wiring is going to be also taking to each of those components in the car Ethernet. Now you've reduced the wiring even further, because right now in the car, the wiring for the computers to connect to, any central point is separate from the power wiring. That's what I mean by the operating system, not the app.
Gotcha.
The app's the
Yep.
easy part.
Yep.
The difficult part is when you've got 150 vendors of software, each writing their own software, each programming their own, and then try and tie that together, try and control that. Not that easy.
Yeah,
So go
Jim
ahead.
Farley had said, like, one example is they have 150 partners. One example he gave was they have a partnership with Bosch. Every time that, which controls the seats, the ability to move the seats forward and backwards. If they wanted the seats to move any slightly different, they have to negotiate with Bosch. Bosch is reluctant to make any changes, even just the ability to move the seats forward and backwards. Because, like I said, that does have a chip that has a smarts, need to be able to electronically control it. And yeah, so it's just impossible. So you're saying, why would they not just partner with Tesla that can control everything in the car with one brain? Yeah,
And
makes sense.
then to have custom software for themselves would be easy, because Tesla would provide the APIs and they could write directly to the API. It could be standardized, across the industry. I mean, it would be that easy.
Yeah.
And there are quite a few other benefits that arise from there. So I would say that it would be, it would, you know, so I don't want to skip past this 48-volt power system that Tesla's working on. For the industry as a whole to change to 48-volt
Mhm.
is going to require an unbelievable amount of change. I can't even imagine how they're going to do it. Once Tesla's done it, it's integrated into all these other components that Tesla has put together. It would be magical for Jim Farley to say, you know what, I want one of those. It would save Jim Farley billions and billions of dollars. And what's the downside? The downside is really not great if he comes to a reasonable deal with Tesla in terms of transfer of knowledge. It gets his engineers over 3 years of development, and they're not going to develop a better system than Tesla. I don't say they can't. They certainly could with with an unlimited expenditure of money. But look what happened to Volkswagen when they tried to do it. I don't know. They hired 14,000 software engineers.
Right.
There's nothing that 14,000 engineers can do that 40 engineers could do. Nothing. I mean, I know. I hired a lot of software people, and I've had a lot of software teams. The bigger the team, the less the productivity. When you get to 14,000, fire them or replace them with 40, you'll get more done. And any serious software engineer understands that. Any serious software engineer understands that. Anyway, so
Well,
this
tell
next
me about
slide.
the
Yeah,
tell me about the business model, though. Okay, so two issues here, right? Would be, could a company like a Ford or GM risk their brand by saying that it's got Tesla inside, or is it going to be just seen very much like, well, Ford and GM already outsource? It's like Apple iPhone; it's outsourced to Foxconn. There's
yeah.
nothing fancy about that. Uh, could that be something that a Ford or GM be able to do? Keep their brand, and yet it's Tesla's inside. And then two, why would Tesla do this? You know, I use, how is it a separate division that they would do software? Is it software plus hardware? Tell me more about what you see there.
There's no differentiating between software and hardware at Tesla. There's no such thing.
Right. Exactly.
And it would require a business unit to actually package the proposal and to create the economics around the parcel and put it together, put the business plan together, and to actually market it. But GM cars today, they don't advertise that they're Bosch cars, even though in some parts of the world, GM doesn't even make their own cars.
That's right.
You know,
They put their badge on it. Yeah.
They put a badge on it. In this case, they would be buying software, components, and some components, by the way, Tesla don't, and I'll show that in a few minutes. Tesla don't build everything that they buy components from tier 1, tier 2 suppliers, but they don't tell you those components. And they're Tesla branded, so they could be GM branded. I mean, nobody need know. If Ford wants to say we have Tesla's FSD, they could definitely say that, or they could say we're gonna put Blues Cruise or whatever their branding is on it. That's up to them. And why should they not? And why would it bother Tesla? So I don't think that from a business perspective, there's any problem for GM or for Ford or Mercedes or whoever, or Volkswagen for that matter, to buy it. But think about Tesla's able to make a car in 40 seconds. That factory, a car pops out of that factory every 40 seconds or every 60 seconds, whatever it is. Volkswagen can't do that. I mean, the bottom line is that there are opportunities to package the Tesla magic and to market and to provide that Tesla magic to as many OEMs as want to move forward very rapidly, and for them to become more competitive and to expand the EV business. I mean, look at what Ford's doing. They're backing off. What they're going to do now, they're going to do hybrids. I mean, can you believe it? BYD is as rapidly closing down their hybrid business as they can, and there's Ford, adopting hybrids. Come on, guys. This is no way to run a railroad.
They have no choice. You just showed that video of Sandy Monroe. That is an electric vehicle. They opened up the front and they couldn't have it empty. It's filled with things.
Amazing. Just amazing. Just amazing. All right, so now I want to show this next slide, and I'm going to show these very quickly, but basically what I'm really showing on this slide is the segments of revenue that are growing rapidly today and the segments of revenue that Tesla could supply the components for in a Tesla OEM operation. So everything in green here you see is showing growth, is showing, these are the areas of massive growth in the OEM world. And look at it. It's electric drivetrain, battery fuel cell, ADAS and sensors, interiors, interiors, not really Tesla's specialty, electronics, body, and infotainment. Their Tesla could package some real technology that would dramatically speed the process of adoption. And that's where the growth is. That's where the growth lies for the OEMs. The stagnant areas, not really interesting from a Tesla's perspective or from a Tesla operating perspective. So that really, shows that that's a real opportunity, because this is the area of growth. This is where the OEMs are going to supply, their stuff. Sorry, the providers, the tier one and tier one are going to provide the principal technologies to these OEMs, and OEMs have to reinvent this entire ecosystem. And as you can see, Ford's failing at it, GM's failing at it. I mean, all of them are failing at it. And who are the guys who are delivering? The guys who are delivering are Chinese firms that are starting from scratch, exactly as Tesla did.
Yeah. This is
Now,
very, very interesting. But
yeah,
before we move on, I love
yeah,
this
yeah,
slide
great.
because this is the question I was asking you, right? Which is what are the components? And
Yeah,
you are talking way more at this point than just the software and the hardware, the brain. You're talking about the drivetrain and the
yeah,
batteries,
yeah,
and it's everything. Now, when you first said this, I started laughing because it's practically the entire car. But then I remembered that, hey, Tesla partnered with Mercedes decades ago, early 2012 and all that,
right.
because they provided the drivetrain for the Mercedes. And so it's not inconceivable. I mean, Tesla, of course, had done it before past. The question is, would they be willing to do this? Well, if you believe that Tesla says that the factory is the product, then
Yes.
if they can continue to make factories, then continue to make parts, they do it so fast and so cheap, then they may be able to deliver it more than what they need. That's the question people say is why would they partner with anybody else? They need every part they create. They can make more cars. They're barely going to make 20 million. Now you're
They
going to try
don't.
to supply others. What's your
They
thoughts
don't
on that?
supply. They don't have to. They can build the plant. I mean, their most valuable product is the plant. So all they have to do is give the Ford the blueprints to the plant, build it like this, do this. Here's the plans, and then we'll come in and help you. I mean, they don't have. Actually, Tesla doesn't have to supply a darn thing. They just have to teach the guys to fish and let the guys
Did you know
fish.
what? Did you know what happened yesterday? Uh, Ford got a loan from the Department of Energy, the U.S. government, for $9 billion to build 3 plants, 3 factories. So maybe they could take that, pay Tesla to design the factory to build these parts. Bing, bang, bing, bang, boom. They're ready to go.
You know, we're talking about making batteries, and people tell me about how Tesla's struggling to make these new batteries. And I try and remind them when Panasonic started this production line, it took them 4 years to get, real production out of that factory. It took 4 years and incredible struggles. That's just what it takes.
Yeah.
And GM's going through that right now. Ford think they well, they'll just build a factory and they'll be able to produce batteries. It ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
Tesla's going through that pain now. Ford could inherit that value tomorrow. GM could shut down that Ultium plant and take on, the Tesla solution. Now, Tesla may be a little bit early for licensing the dry battery process and the 4680. It's still early, and they don't have all the chemistries that are going to be necessary. So, maybe they still have to buy a third-party battery or whatever. But just think about how much further they would be along if they could inherit some of that technology.
Yeah.
So
And
you're
the other
right. I
thing,
mean,
yeah.
I'm not talking about just the software. I'm not talking about just the operating system. I'm talking about buying from Tesla just the way they buy from the OEMs. Right now, they're buying from Bosch and they're buying from, XYZ. I don't want to go through the whole list of them all, but they're buying from all these different suppliers. What's wrong with Tesla as a supplier? They're going
I
to be around in tough times. Their suppliers
the
we saw in this previous slide aren't going to be
yeah.
there in tough times.
The one thing I can think why this would happen is because there's so many legacy OEMs and they're all dying, and so they're getting very desperate. But Tesla can really only partner with one or maybe two for the next several
Well,
years, and so one of them's going to realize I need to be the first, announce the partnership with Tesla, and then the rest are going to clamor for the second, and then that's basically all Tesla can do for the next 5 years. The rest are shit out of luck. It's over, for them. They're dying. So
when you're
one of them is going to
licensing,
balk.
when you're licensing, you're not limited in terms of scope. You're not limited in terms of numbers of customers.
What?
You can expand
Okay.
to the number of customers almost infinitely because you
But
don't
the
have to
product.
build plants. They're building the plants. They're so But
Okay.
there'll be a mix. They'll want to produce the first pieces first, to ship. Look, those are problems that they can deal with. The rate of which they can grow and the number of clients they can take on. But if you look at the NACS, look how the pins fell. Once the first pin
Yep.
fell, it all. Anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So this next slide actually shows the potential for growth in these green areas we looked at a little bit earlier. If you look at the left side of this chart, you'll see the particular market size for that particular plant. So if you look at the electric drivetrain right now, I can't read it, is 29 billion.
29. Yeah.
With the opportunity, the market size in 2027 being 100 billion. So you're looking at a 3 times growth, three and a third times growth, just in that area alone. So you take Tesla's, motors. I mean, they're the best in the business.
Mhm.
They're the best in the business. Why wouldn't GM want to just inherit that motor and make that? Same with the batteries. Obviously, the ADAS as well. I think they're underestimating the size of the market in ADAS. Electronics, Tesla could just give them the designs and let them loosen their chip with Tesla's own chip manufacturer.
Mhm.
And the same is true of infotainment. So that just gives you a sense of the opportunity, and really it's all in the plans that Tesla has, the designs that Tesla has, the methods that Tesla have, the the formula for the metals that Tesla has, all of that, and the software. Now it's in the software that Tesla may have to put bodies into the process, and that may be a scaling problem because I can't see these other firms really doing that well. I think they'll set up a bureaucracy and it will die. So that just gives you a sense of the opportunity.
Hey there, thank you for joining me. If you can, please consider supporting this channel so I can keep it going. It's a lot of work arranging all these amazing interviews. One of the easiest ways is just to click that join button and become a member of the channel. Thank you very much, and let's get brighter. How do you see this falling? So we've basically saw them say we're willing to partners with supercharger networks, and the Ford started, GM started, now 7, 8, everybody's going to fall and partner. Then Elon announced at the last earnings call that they're already in talks with one major OEM for licensing full self-driving. Okay, and FSD is the thing, right? So Elon's been talking about it.
Yeah, but let me remind you what he did say. Just
Mhm.
very important to hear what he did say. He didn't say they're already in talks. They are in very early talks.
Yeah, early thoughts.
What that translates to in my book is that their feelers out on both sides. They're thinking about it. I'm not sure that this is, real. And so I'd be a little bit cautious about that.
Okay. So that's FSD. Now, for this thing, so you're talking about the operating system, the going beyond that into drivetrains and batteries and ADAS and others. How do you see that happening? Will it just come out of the blue? Do you think it'll be pieces at a time?
I think given given the drivetrain controls, the motors. If you think about what used to be the skateboard, but now we can talk about the drivetrain and the castings and the battery, what's the word for the battery? The battery that forms part of the the structural battery. Thank you. The structural battery pack. That all is going to require some engineering transfer of knowledge, plans, designs, all of the, the componentry and the factory that would support that. And, a discussion about how the battery is going to be made, who's going to make the batteries in the battery plant. So, and of course the electronics that go with it, the software that goes with it, and the control and the design of that software and the adaptation of that software to the design of the car. All of that requires a lot of design work, a lot of engineering work, a lot of support. And for that, Tesla will have to charge engineering. I mean, they would charge for the engineering, they would charge for the time that their people have to spend on it. And of course, they would charge some royalty on the car or on the pieces being used. Tesla will also have to, in due course, provide the design for the 48-volt system, because they're going to have to design it, source it, test it, produce it, and then integrate it into the vehicle. And that's going to require a new vehicle design. So that may be a little bit further down the road. And all of this is going to have to be packaged as software. And so the software engineers are going to have to do some transfer of knowledge, transfer of code and transfer of knowledge. So because that code was going to have to be modified for the client. So we're talking about a fairly significant program. This program would require, a structure, a corporate structure, an organization, not a corporate structure, an organization and control and management. So it's going to take some time to do. And it's best done with a partner. It's best done with the first guy who signs up, because that will really teach Tesla how to put the package together.
What I've heard you say before was there's the partnership with superchargers, but this opens it up. And I know that Jeff Lutz, who's a chief executive, sort of a high-level executive at Fortune 100 companies, who's responsible for supply chain, says that once you've established an agreement with a supplier or partnership between the two parties, it makes it easier to really add on addendums. And so the supercharging network requires partnerships beyond just charging network. There's an app, there's an API, there's integration to software. This then maybe allows them to expand that. So that's your operating system. And then you were saying that maybe they might even, now license designs and plans for various parts or for the factory, those kind of things. Okay. Now, what do you think about lithium refinery? So the minerals and resources, because what I remember the discussion between Elon and Jim Farley when they were announcing the supercharged network, 2 times in that space, in that Twitter space, Jim Farley said, "Tell me more about your lithium refinery." It sounded like that was his next priority, was getting access to lithium for the batteries. Do you think that could be another partnership that might follow?
Absolutely. Once Tesla opens itself up as a supplier, as a 0.5 level supplier, it will share, Tesla should share everything they can. Now, they have to prioritize their own production, obviously, and they have to prioritize their own use. And what's really interesting is for them to be able to design in partnership with their partners. So when they build the 48-volt system, they show the partners what they're going to be doing, and the partners say, yeah, that works, but I need this as well. And they can engineer that in, or the partner can help engineer that in. That's really, that's how, tier 1 suppliers work right now with their OEMs. But, if you think about the tier 1 supplier, they're really focused on their little part, or their piece of the car. Tesla's really involved with the whole car. And so it's a much, much better system. Now, many tier 1 suppliers actually build cars that the OEMs badge. And that's becoming more and more popular. And that allows them to do the engineering, with their own parts in the car. So there's some value to that. But Tesla would be in the pound seats as far as that's concerned. So it would work extremely well. I mean, people have to get over their psychological block, that this new kid on the block is now suddenly a principal supplier to them. I think those days are kind of over. I don't think that it's a problem
I
anymore.
mean, just a few days ago, Volkswagen partnered with Xiaopeng in China, and they bought $700 million to get 5% ownership of Xiaopeng, so that Xiaopeng can create two vehicles for them. And all Volkswagen will do is put their badge on these two vehicles.
It's
So
very sad. It's
I
very
mean,
sad.
obviously, that's a changing of the guards. There's a very large legacy brand that has basically waved the white flag in China because they couldn't sell their cars in China with the Volkswagen made cars, and so now they had to partner with an upstart Chinese brand to do it. And so I think they're getting desperate. And then their subsidiary Audi partnered with SAIC, which is another Chinese auto manufacturer. So
Yeah.
it's just a matter of time before some company will do the same thing. Tesla create an entire car, and I will put my badge on it. But what you're saying is there's so many pieces here that they could actually license out that few of us have even thought that it's even possible. But it's looking.
The last thing they need to do is buy a Tesla car and put their badge on it. That's the very last thing they need to do. They need to get the technology in-house. And the way to get the technology in-house is to license it on a 25-year term and build off this incredible base of knowledge that Tesla has, and build their own car, build their own design, build their own car end to end, reduce significantly their dependency on OEMs, improve their operations. Now, they have a problem. Ford is a problem. It's a union shop, and it's going to be very hard for them to do some of the things that Tesla's able to do because of the work rules. So I think that that's going to be an impediment for them.
What's interesting is I'm going to go back to this slide that you shared right at the beginning of this session here, because they're really they need to right the ship as they move along. There's this hemorrhaging money as they're trying to transition to EVs, and so they're almost needing to do this in order to save their company. They're already there basically on this chart. You're showing that.
I struggle to understand this chart. I struggle so hard to understand this chart. Herbert,
Why?
if I were a CEO
Yeah.
of any company to the right of Ferrari, any of these companies, I would have to look at myself and say, what am I doing wrong? Where did I take the wrong turn? As Jim Farley says, we have to turn left. You can't go on doing the same thing over and over, and think you're going to dig yourself out of this hole.
Yeah, it's time. They're desperate. Okay, well, Larry, this was a very, very big, giant idea. You blew my mind because initially I thought you were just going to talk about, the partnership with the supercharged networks, expanding to software, SD maybe, which is big already, and then the operating system. But you went on said that they very likely might even license out all these different parts, drivetrain, batteries, all these things, and then maybe even the design for the factory. That's big. This is big. And then you showed the actual numbers of percentage of billions of dollars that can flow, much of it going back to Tesla if they decide to do this. That's massive business. They basically are going to be the Tesla inside.
Yeah, it's not a $1 trillion business like all our good friends talk about, these different businesses each being a $1 trillion business. I don't think it's a $1 trillion business. I think it's a business that is extremely important for Tesla to pursue, because I don't see how these guys, this whole collection, this motley collection of companies in that slide, I just don't see how they get over the hurdles. The fact that so many have failed just this year. I mean, you look at these EVs sitting on lots, unsaleable, and they cost the OEM 4 times what they're selling for. I mean, guys, this is no way. This is not the way to do it. And
Oh,
it is not in, sorry.
if Tesla solves FSD, then you know it's game over, and these guys have to do this. But I can see that this is part of the mission, Tesla's mission, right? Because they don't want these brands to die. In fact, it's to their benefit. They can benefit by licensing FSD, by licensing even many parts to them. Why not have many different brands and just get robotaxi distributed as fast as possible? So that part, I think, makes more sense than Tesla just going to be, I'm going to be the one brand that's going to control the entire world and only robotaxi only from Tesla's brand. That's not likely.
We have a real problem in China. We have a real problem in China. When I say we, I mean the global we. All of us outside of China have a real problem. That the Chinese OEMs are going to dominate the world if we just go on doing what we're doing. You have Volkswagen doing these incredibly brainless moves. I mean, so brainless it is staggering, because they don't feel they have a choice. We can't afford, we collectively, the world can't afford to simply sit back and let China become the sole manufacturer of vehicles.
Yeah.
Because that's the other alternative. We have to teach every one of the Western OEMs how to do what Tesla's done. And Tesla's the one to do it. And they can benefit from it financially very well. And everybody can win. Everybody can win.
Yeah, it is. It is curious why Volkswagen would go to a small Chinese company before they would even go to Tesla. And if it's yeah, right. Interesting.
Herbert Diess would never have done this.
Well, that's why he's not working there anymore.
You're right.
But they let him go.
You're right. You're right. You're
But awesome, Larry. This is a
I have to
massive,
say, Herbert, I started exactly where you started. The idea of, well, they've already got the app. Let's just expand it. Let's do FSD.
Well, idea.
And then as I began to think through it, I thought, what would I do? What would I do? And I really came up with this idea before Jim Farley gave the bad news last week. And when I heard that news, I thought, oh my God, Jim, come on.
Yeah, it's time. They're going to do it. Well, the breadcrumbs have been there, right? There's Elon taught from the beginning saying that we don't want to, the patents, we don't need patents. We're here to, partner. They've been licensing with Mercedes. They're willing to license as often as they want. Of course, they couldn't do it until now. They have multiple factories in place. They've got their own act together with a new design of the unbox process. The unbox process itself is very likely partly driven because of this idea that they could, it's a modular platform, and then you have different vehicle parts being added to it. And so why not just take a Ford version of it and put it on instead of the van version or the compact version, the robotaxi version, but the Ford's version. And it's all kind of like making sense that, Tesla's thinking about this, and he's always repeated the factory is the product. And so scratch your head, what do you mean by that? It could be as simply as saying that, if I focus on the factory, that's the entire business, is the ability for us to create things at scale, at cost effective. But it also could mean it's the product. I'm going to go license the product in the future. This is what to sell. We're going to take over all manufacturing of all products. It's our factory that people will buy.
What you're saying is essentially that it isn't the OEMs that should be quaking in their boots. It is the tier 1 and N suppliers that should be quaking in their boots.
I'm glad you gave us stats. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Larry. This was great. That was fantastic, and appreciate it. So, folks, if you're not already following Larry on Twitter, his handle is at Tesla Larry. He's high in demand. Everybody wants to bring him on their show, so I really appreciate you doing that. Thank you again for coming on to my show. Thanks.
Thank you.